Depending on how old you are, you may think of this when you think of Peter Pan, the original Disney animated classic. Or you might think of this, the animated show from 90s from Fox Kids. Or you might think of Steven Spielberg's Hook, the story of an older Peter Pan returning to Neverland to face Captain Hook one more time. But now we live in the age of the Disney live-action remake. So going forward, Disney would like you to think of this. That's right. Disney's Peter Pan and Wendy dropped on Disney Plus this over the last weekend, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to review it. We're going to break it down. Spoiler alert past this point. We are going to talk about some plot details of the movie, and I'll be giving my thoughts. So let's go into it. So just like the animated movie, this movie starts in the bedroom of the Darling kids as they're getting ready for bed, but it's not quite the tranquil night bedtime scene that we got in the animated movie. It's not so restrained. In this one, we've got Wendy just kind of like a girl boss owning her brothers in a sword fight as they play some kind of pirate game. And Wendy breaks a mirror during their sword fight because her awesomeness cannot be contained by her bedroom, which brings her parents up because they heard the ruckus, and they get lectured about playing in the house and that Wendy should know better. It's time for her to grow up and stop playing games of sword fighting and swashbuckling, like all little girls in the Victorian age did. And that it's time for her to grow up because she's going to boarding school in the morning, and this is her last day in her home, to where Wendy replies she doesn't want to grow up and goes to bed. Later that night, Tinkerbell breaks into their house and starts abducting Wendy. She just sprinkles pixie dust on her and starts flying her out the window. This wakes up her brothers, who catch Tinkerbell, which finally enter Peter Pan, who puts a knife to the throat of one of her brothers and tells him to release Tinkerbell, elsewise I guess he'll slit their throats. So they work through this little problem and sprinkle pixie dust on everybody. We're getting ready to fly, but then, Peter forgot member berries. I'm supposed to chase my shadow. So they shoehorn in the little shadow scene. Just out of nowhere, he remembers, oh yeah, my shadow, I got to chase it. It's here somewhere. Help me find it. And so they chase the shadow. Then they fly out the window, off to Neverland, second star to the right. And we get our first glimpse of Neverland, which just kind of looks like the English countryside, really, or the English coastline. It's just green and rocky with some ocean waves. There's no magic. There's no whimsy. There's no treehouse, no true north in the shallows of the ocean. No, it just looks like anywhere else would look if it's near the beach. So if you want kind of magic and imagination, look elsewhere. This isn't your kind of movie. This is when we're introduced to Captain Hook. He's the villain for today, and he sees Peter Pan, so he starts shooting cannons because that's what pirates do. He gets a good beat on Peter and Wendy as they try to hide behind some rocks, gets a good shot off, and all the kids kind of scatter in different directions. Peter just gets blown out of the movie for a few scenes, I guess. Wendy lands on the coastline where she needs to go find help because her brothers land in the water and are captured by the pirates. So wandering around looking for help, Wendy finds the Lost Boys, or more accurately, the ethnically diverse Lost People, because as we all saw in the preview, yes, some of the Lost Boys are girls. In fact, I'd say a little over half of them are girls, actually, and which case I have to stop the review right now just to address that, because in the original novelization of Peter Pan, it's actually addressed why there's no lost girls, and it's just the Lost Boys, because Peter says girls are far too clever to get lost. So that was always kind of a nod to how little girls tend to be a little smarter than little boys at certain ages. Kind of a wink and a nod to that. But this is a girl power fantasy movie, so none of that. Smash the patriarchy. Girls can be just as good as boys, and they can get lost and be pig-headed too. So anyway, on to the review. Tiger Lily is the leader of the Lost Boys, not really Peter Pan. And so they devise a plan to rescue the kids who've been taken to Skull Rock, which is a place where pirates traditionally execute people, I guess. And Captain Hook was waiting for him. The whole thing was a trap. They fight. Peter Pan enters back in the movie. He and Hook have a little sword fight, and the crocodile enters and just kind of throws everything into chaos, and everybody runs in different directions because they're afraid of the croc, except for the kids, not really, because he's really just there for the pirates. And we just stop the review again to talk about the crocodile. So the crocodile in this movie never took Hook's hand. And the crocodile never swallowed a clock, so he doesn't make the tick-tock noise. So I don't understand why, A, Hook is afraid of the crocodile, other than the fact that it's just a giant crocodile. B, why Hook in the movie is afraid of clocks when the tick-tock croc doesn't make the noise, nor is he the thing responsible for his hand, as far as I could tell. because he has a different origin in this movie. We learn in the next scene, after Wendy, Peter, and everyone else get back to the shores of Neverland, and Wendy berates Peter for being bad at his job and literally slaps him in the face and tells him the only reason he's even still alive and Captain Hook hasn't killed him is because he has Tinkerbell and Tiger Lily to be strong female characters and bail his butt out all the time. We find out when they get back to Peter's home that Hook is just a lost boy. He's a former lost boy who wandered away, I guess left Neverland, and came back as an angry, bitter pirate. So, yeah, that's why he's mad at Peter. The two of them used to be best friends when they were kids, apparently. And during this whole storytelling exposition scene, apparently Hook says, "Oh, well, I heard you talking from here, my former childhood home, because it's where the Lost Boys live, and he used to live there because he used to be a Lost Boy." Which raises the question, why hasn't Hook shown up here before? I mean, he knows where it is. He grew up there. He just said it. So anyway, he shows up. He stabs Peter in the heart, kills him, and then Peter falls like 5 stories and lands on a concrete floor. So he's gone. Hook captures all the Lost Boys, captures Wendy, captures her brothers, chains them all up, takes them back to the boat, and he's going to make them walk the plank. But, of course, Wendy, being the, just Mary Sue that she is, doesn't need Peter Pan or anybody. She rescues herself, and she just starts single-handedly defeating all the pirates. And at this point, I need to warn you because this movie turns into some kind of a weird, drunken fever dream at this point. Everything that happens from here on out. So get ready for it. You're about to see it. Wendy levitates outside of the boat, then uses all of her awesome girl powers to levitate the entire ship out of the water. And so now the boat's just floating 50 feet above the water. Wendy is just mowing down pirates one after another. And Peter Pan, you hear his little cock-a-doodle-doo noise because he's back in the fight because Tiger Lily showed up at his house and pulled out a poultice and stuck it on Peter's gaping chest wound, which apparently can heal not only an impaled heart, but most likely the collapsed skull and shattered vertebrae of a 50-foot fall onto a concrete block. And he's now riding basically side saddle on Tiger Lily's horse because he can't fly anymore. And they're off to fight Hook. So at this point, we get our obligatory Captain Hook versus Peter Pan sword fight because Tiger Lily does kind of a Matrixy flip thing, and she pulls out a couple of tomahawks, and she's just mowing down what few pirates Wendy can't handle by herself. And so during the sword fight between Peter and Hook, it is clear that Peter Pan is completely out of his depth. He can't hold a torch to Captain Hook. So you would have never guessed that these were two adversaries who've been in this struggle of mortal combat against each other for decades, because Peter is just getting owned left and right to the point that Wendy literally saves his life twice during the sword fight. Once actually deflecting what would have been the death blow from Hook, and then another time catching him like he's freaking Lois Lane after he falls from a mast trying to maintain his balance against Captain Hook. So the fight's not going Peter's way at all. And Wendy grabs a hold of the ship's steering wheel and she turns the whole boat on its axis, dumping all the pirates into the ocean. So she finishes the job of single-handedly defeating Hook's entire crew. And Hook then, at this point, is still fighting Peter, but Peter lowers his sword, and he just said, "Hey, Hook, I'm sorry. I was a bad friend back in the day. So, yeah, I forgive you," or whatever. And he just lowers his sword. Forget about the fact that, you've tormented me for years. You just stabbed me in the heart, threw me down a 50-story drop and left me for dead, took all my friends and everyone I've ever known and loved, chained them up and threatened to drown them alive. I'm sorry. I was a lousy friend to you. That's why you were so bad. And so Hook finally loses balance. Peter tries to catch him and tells him to think a happy thought. He can just fly to safety because he's a lost boy. And then Hooks just tells him, "I have no happy thoughts to give." And then he falls with the rest of the pirates. down into the ocean below. Wendy and Peter then take the boat. They sail, since it's now flying, they sail the whole thing back to England, where they drop off Wendy and her brothers and the entirety of the Lost Boys, who apparently are just going to move in with the Darling family now, because that's where they just kind of leave it. She sees Peter crying on the rooftop. He says he's not quite ready to grow up yet. And he Tinkerbell take the flying pirate ship and just fly into space. And that's it. That's the dumb as a sack of baloney plot of Peter Pan and Wendy. Oh my God, what an actual mess. This is a dumpster fire on wheels of a movie. It was disjointed. It was boring. It was hard to follow. Scenes just kind of happen one after another with no real bridge or connecting tissue as to why one thing even leads to another. So I don't even know how to really rate this movie. I mean, I guess the first place to start is with Peter himself. So first of all, Peter's not in the movie a whole lot. I mean, he's in the beginning, and then he gets knocked out by a cannon, and then he's gone for a while, and then he comes back, and then he gets berated a little bit by Wendy, cries, and then gets stabbed in the heart, and is gone again for a while. I mean, he basically takes the entire third act off, and then he comes back at the end and loses a sword fight to Captain Hook. I mean, he was kind of sad. He was. I don't understand how he possibly could have survived in Neverland all this long. The original Peter was capable, and he was kind of somewhat of a guide, and he was helpful and knowledgeable, and he was a match for Captain Hook because he'd been doing it for so long. And I mean, he was cocky and arrogant, but he'd kind of earned that rep a little bit by, besting this pirate and his crew for so many years. Wendy's role to Peter was to show him what he'd always been missing from a mother. That was kind of her thing. She was always this kind of maternal, caregiving, empathetic character. And since they've transformed her into this weird Galadriel level Mary Sue of a girl boss, you don't get that anymore. Now we should probably move on to Hook, I guess, because, Hook, he's the antagonist in the movie, but the main problem that I see, the biggest departure with Hook is, back in the day, the genius of Hook's character is he's less is more. He has everything he needs, and that's it. He has, first of all, he's a narrative device. He represents kind of what kids see as adults. He's authority. He's the end of fun. He's structure. He's tyrannical. He hates Peter Pan because Peter Pan took his hand. He scarred him. He crippled him. He has a weakness, the crocodile. He's afraid of it. Peter can exploit that if he's ever in too much trouble. This new version of Hook, they gave him this personal connection to Pan that never really needed to exist. He already had the reason to hate Peter Pan. It was simple. He took his hand. It's similar to why Captain Ahab hates Moby Dick, because the whale crippled him. It took his leg, and it created this obsessive need for revenge. That was Hook's character. This version is, I don't know, he's just kind of pathetic. You feel bad for him. By the end of the movie, he's just like a sad little kid who lost his toy. I mean, I don't know. I didn't feel anything for this character. The connection they tried to paint between him and Peter just never really felt realized to me. He didn't represent what he's supposed to represent. And as far as the crocodile goes, the crocodile is supposed to represent mortality. That's why he's a ticking clock. That's why he stalks Hook, and Pan's not afraid of him, because Hook's an old man and Peter Pan never ages. And it took his hand because time ravages your body as time goes on. That's all of this is symbolism, but all of that is lost on these just amateur, juvenile hack writers that cobbled the script together by pounding their fists against typewriters or whatever it is that they did. And that brings us to the greatest sin of all, which is Wendy herself. So, like I said before, Wendy's role in the story is she is supposed to be maternal instinct. She is empathy. She is a caregiver. She shows the boys that structure and thoughtfulness and all of these things are important virtues. That Hook has made adulthood to look like something to be feared, something to be something to run from, something to fight against, where she shows, no, there's good sides. There's a reason why structure needs to happen. There's a reason why we need to know skills. There's a reason why responsibility is important. That's Wendy's role in the story. Peter never had that. He'd never been exposed to it. So his transformative moment comes through Wendy, but you don't have that in this story, because Wendy in this story starts the movie with everything she needs to end the movie with no help at all. So she never really has the why I need to grow up moment that she had in the animated show, because she's perfectly capable at her current level to do everything she needs to do. So there is no, oh, okay, no, I see there's nothing to fear in growing up. Growing up is that adventure. She says it at the end, but there's no reason for her to come to that realization. I mean, she's a better Peter Pan than Peter Pan. And that's part of the main problem, because when you have Wendy, who's a better sword fighter than Peter Pan, she flies better than Peter Pan, she fights better than Pan, she already knows the life lesson that she's supposed to learn in this story. You don't need Peter. He's been upstaged his whole movie. In fact, if at the beginning of the movie, when Captain Hook is firing his cannons, if he would have connected with Peter and just killed him in the first few minutes of this movie, nothing would have changed. Everything would have still happened in its same order. We just would have had a little bit less exposition of Peter telling us about he and Hook's relationship. That's how pointless Peter Pan is. She didn't need him to rescue her brothers originally. She didn't need him to get away from Captain Hook in the cave. She didn't need him to escape from Captain Hook's clutches in the boat, and she didn't need him to get back to England. Peter Pan is completely irrelevant in the story of Peter Pan in this movie, and that's one of the greatest sins of all. So she also falls into the category of the laws of reality and the laws of the movie's world bend to what Wendy is doing. So we'll look at Flight, for example. Excuse me. Flight happens in this story because you have pixie dust and you think a happy thought. That's the physics of flight in the world of Peter Pan. Wendy doesn't need pixie dust because she showed that when she was walking the plank, she didn't have it, yet she could fly anyway. When Peter was away from fairy dust, he couldn't fly at all. Wendy not only was able to make herself fly, but she was able to extend her flight field, her warp field, to the entirety of the Captain Hook ship and levitate it like a Jedi master out of the ocean. So how does that work? And then she's able to get to the steering wheel of the boat, and even though the rudder's not in any water and the sails aren't catching any wind, she's able to turn the boat to avoid cliff sides and then ultimately flip it on its axis to dump pirates into the water. These pirates, there's about 50 pirates on Hook's ship, and all 50 of these grown men combined are no match for Wendy Darling. So that said, I don't understand either how they're a match for Peter Pan unless A, Peter is remarkably incompetent, which is kind of where the movie heads you, or B, these pirates are no threat at all if they can't handle a little girl who's never encountered a pirate before. So again, I mean, Mary Sue is not even a good enough description for what Wendy is in this movie. She's a walking cheat code at this point. Tiger Lily is about the same level, by the way, with her fighting skills or ability to bring people back from the dead and everything else that the story needed her to be at whatever moment in time she happens to be on screen. Ultimately, this movie is just a mess. It's a mess in every in every sense of the word. The characters are a mess. No characters very well realized. They try to create a backstory that just really didn't float. The script just kind of jumps from scene to scene without really setting anything up. There's no payoff at the end of this movie. Yeah, this movie's just a total and absolute disaster and a complete skip on every level. So I don't know that I can think of anything better to say about this movie. I can't think of a strength that this movie has. It has an okay cast, I guess. They just had a terrible script to work with. That's probably about the only compliment I guess I could really muster for it. So, Peter, I say total pass on this movie. There's no amount of, mind-altering substances or anything can make this movie worth watching, in my opinion. So, it has no redeeming quality. If you've seen it, I'd like to know your opinion. Did it make sense to you? Did I miss why Hook is afraid of clocks? Maybe you guys can explain that to me in the comments below. While you're down there, do all the usual stuff. Like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, and I'll see you in the next video.